Holyoke, Massachusetts, and we're looking at the last block of the North High Street Historic District. We're across the street from the Crafts building, and if you had come out here in the 1850s and 60s, you would see a different building from this. You would have seen one made by Roswell Craft, which was a very important business building, because he would have a lot of function in this building. But sadly, in the year 1873, there was a fire and it burned down that building, right? And it was totally destroyed. It was basically the social function hall of all of Holyoke. It was also the home of a lot of churches before they started in buildings. But when that fire hit in 1875, he built this building. In 1874, he built the Caledonia. And so this Crafts building, named after Roswell Craft, is his replacement. And it's a very simple building. He would sell his produce on the ground floor. He would also stay out in front of the building and talk or gossip about the news of the day. And what he did was all the following. He was a fire chief for 2 years. He was a mayor for 3 years. He was head of a post office at Holyoke. He was also a dealer in produce. He was a dealer in real estate. He did a lot of things. And he developed this building in Caledonia to great heights. Now in the back right was the first of movie theaters, one of the first movie theaters in Holyoke. It was called the Star Movie Theater. Now I've asked people that have gone in there if there's any evidence where the stars existed. It was a Nickelodeon theater, so Nickelodeons didn't have big screens, so there's no evidence left. But this was one of the first Nickelodeons. It could have been even the first one from about 1905. Now right next to it, you see the Derek Stratton building. This is now called the Warsaw by most people. And there again you have the same structure. You have the ground floor being stores, upper floor being a professional office, and the third floor being apartments for people. Now, right across the street from us is the remains of the Delaney block. In 1870 they made this, and it was 4 floors high. It's now only 1 floor high, much smaller, but it used to be much bigger. And you can tell that by looking at either one of the vertical strips of bricks on either side of it, and you see the evidence for the floor right in the brick sides. It was 4 floors high. It was basically a hotel for most of it. Some of it was also storage space on the ground floor, and it would change through the years drastically into taverns, back into a hotel. Whatever the new owner came along and did, they would change it. Now sadly, fire claimed some of the upper floors. They had to bring it down to a lower level. And if you look at an old picture I have of this on my website, you can see it from an angle. It was the biggest building on this section of High Street, and also the grandest. It was the widest and grandest of all. Okay, now the next one along, you can see there a building that's officially 3 floors high. The upper floor is called a French roof. It used to be the Holyoke Lock Company, and it was that since 1940. It was a very old company that moved out about 10 years ago to Chicopee. Now, the building, most people just call it the Holyoke Lock Company still, and I do that. All that was made in 1870, way before the Holyoke Lock Company was around. It was a Second Empire Victorian building. This was unique because, too bad it's now shingled on the front, because its facade, upper facade, was very ornate, and the back had the same style of facade. And so you have an alleyway that has a facade to it. That's extremely unusual. And that's because the hotel that was next to it, the Delaney block, had an apartment building in the back that had a second floor walkway to get to the building behind it. So they were trying to attract business on both sides of this Holyoke Lock building. Okay, the next building along is called the Higgins block. He was a dealer in produce. His name was Dennis Higgins. It was made in 1860 in Italian architectural style. When he died, his wife took it over, and she owned it for longer than he did. Right? and it's still in great shape. Now there's one building missing. Sadly, it was built in 1860. About 4 years ago, it was taken down, and you can see evidence on the far wall of the next building. All right, and as you go along, there's four more blocks on the very tip of High Street. High Street at one time went a block further, and it's gone now. It was taken out by urban renewal. So this is now the last block of High Street. And we'll talk about those last 4 blocks. Okay, the next one along doesn't have a name to it. And I give it a name after a person that lived there. I won't mention it, but it was a sad story here. The person that owned that block in the late 19 teens, he was part of a scam where they got grain alcohol and tried to make it seem to patrons that it was real alcohol you can drink, but it was nothing like it. And people across southern New England drank it, and about 60 people died, and about 10 of those were from Holyoke, and he was part of it. And the building itself is from 1895. It's called a Renaissance Revival building. The ground floor must have been more ornate than it is now, because it's very simple now, but in the Renaissance Revival, you always have very ornate ground floors. Okay, 3 more. The Bon Velour building is next. That's from 1884. It's Victorian Italianate. The Victorian, you can tell by the upper roof, it's very ornate upper roof, and that's a sign of Victorian business architecture. And it was named after the person that owned it, the Bon Velour family. And again, they had the same pattern. On this one, they had an undertaker owning the ground floor. In fact, the undertaker was also the bar owner on the next building in, and they were one and the same person. And so he ran an undertaker business in a bar, and he's the one that ended up dishing out some of the alcohol that killed people. Okay, and then the next one short of the very end. Now, people don't believe this. They think, oh, the Victory Theater is the only theater left in Holyoke. No. You see a 2-story building there? That's the Royal Theater from 1917, right? And in this building, 1917 to 1939, for 22 years, you had the Royal Theater serving up first-run movies to patrons. And if you go in there, the walls look like a movie theater style. They're very ornate look to them. And it even surprised me that there's one left. So there's at least 2 Nickelodeon buildings left, the Star and the Park, and there's 2 major grand theaters left, the Royal and the Victory Theater. All right, the last building is the oldest building on High Street from 1847. It's the Gallaudet building. It was made to be a produce building. When it was made, it was 3 floors high. Notice it's 4 floors high now. If you go up there, the brick drastically changes between the 3rd and 4th floor. This was made to serve the people like the canal diggers that came into the city in 1848, needing produce, food, paper towels, whatever you needed, they would buy it here. So it was a very successful store in the beginning. Thank you for this wonderful tour of High Street.